name is Jason, JROCK Houston, and tonight you guys are listening to an interview being done for ChaoticRiffs.com, and we're speaking with legendary Rods drummer Carl Canedy. Now, of course, Carl, tonight we'll be talking to you about your new solo album, Headbanger, but before we get into that, I'd like to give people a little bit of a history lesson on your career, because, like I was saying, you got your start with the legendary New York band, The Rods, and you're, of course, the original drummer from the band, and you've been in the band all these years. I was wondering if you could share with us how the band first got together and what year that was.
That was, I want to say, late 1979.
Okay.
And we, David and I had known each other. I played in a band called Brian's Idols with Dave Porter, who wound up founding a group called 805 with Frank Briggs and company. And so we rehearsed in the garage portion of the building, and Elf rehearsed in the house. So I'd known David since, he was in Elf in the early days. So it was just a question of, in our area, there really weren't a lot of guys into heavy music, especially when we started the Rods. At that point, it was Bee Gees, and, it was just not a heavy scene at all. So it was just sort of natural that the two of us would migrate together. And that's how we started. So. And
so let me ask you, when you met David, because like you're saying, he was in Elf with his cousin Ronnie Dio before that, and I understand when Ronnie left to join Rainbow that David went with him for a short while before Richie decided to bring in his own guys. Did you ever see David playing with that version of Rainbow?
Actually, I don't believe that ever happened. I think that was perhaps a myth.
A myth.
The urban legends.
Okay.
David actually left before, when they were on tour with Deep Purple, before they made Carolina County Ball. They've been on tour for, they were on tour for a year solid with Deep Purple. And after that year, I believe David left Elf, and they brought in a new guitarist.
Okay.
And they did Carolina County Ball, and I think somewhere after that incarnation of Elf, that's when Richie took the band, and minus the guitarist, who was not David.
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks for clearing that up, because that is one of those myths I've heard quite a few times over the years now. Now, the Rods sound drastically different from what David was doing with an Elf. So when you guys hooked up, is that kind of just naturally the music that evolved, or did you guys form this band with the intention of really being a full-on metal band?
I think like so many bands, and I think that, the music that Elf made with Ronnie, Mickey Lee, with Gary Driscoll, David, they were a blues-based band.
Yeah.
And, the stuff they did was still powerful and heavy. I mean, they were one of the loudest bands I'd ever heard anyway, even though they were playing, Elf-style music, which is a little more, because of Mickey Lee being such a phenomenal player, it was a little more of that piano-oriented sound. But David's sound was always heavy. He's always had a heavy sound. He's always played that way. I think when the two of us got together, there was no doubt that, at least in my mind, that our styles meshed very well, and it was just, that was the sound. And I think David, for me, it goes back to, David wrote a song that was on the first album, the Primal Records, and it's still out there as bonus tracks, called Getting Higher. And that song for me was like the template of the Rods. That sound, when we did that song, David wrote it and brought it in, and we played it. For me, that was the epiphany. That's the Rod sound. That's us. So I think after that, I know I sort of tailored my songwriting to that style. But I just think it was, the mesh was really from our styles together. It was really the sound. I don't think there was anything that we consciously said, we're going to be heavy. I just think it was what it was when we started playing. It just was heavy.
Well, that's cool.
Particularly, sorry to interrupt, but particularly when we were in Ithaca, in that area at that time, like I said, it was Bee Gees and dance music, and I got a lot of crap from friends who saw me as a drummer who was capable of what they felt was more than heavy metal, and I got a lot of flack from those people because, what are you doing playing that kind of music? That sucks. That shit's horrible. And so it was definitely a test to me that I had to stop for a minute and rethink. Geez, so I really, this is the direction I really want to go in, but it was such a natural fit. I was like, yeah, screw it. This is what I want to do.
And I got to ask you, Carl, who are the drummers, that inspired you? The reason I ask is because most of the time people think of the drummers as the guy that keeps the beat, the guy that sits in the back of the stage, but you are so much more than just a drummer, because like you were just mentioning that you're also very involved with the songwriting, which drummers typically aren't.
I guess so. I mean, I think more so now, and I know that obviously I played guitar probably almost as long as I played drums, and I write a lot of material. Yeah. So it was natural that David and I were songwriters of the band, and I think over the years David's written a little bit more of the percentage of the material, but it's been close to 50-50 overall.
Yeah.
But I think when I worked with Anthrax, Charlie Donati wrote a lot of material with the band, and he's an excellent guitarist. I think there are, I think there were, I don't know if it was prior to that, but I think at that time, I don't think it was that uncommon. I think there were a lot of musicians or drummers who were starting to show their songwriting talent through other instruments, so.
I mean, yeah. You even take a guy like Neil Peart. I mean, Rush, and and he's the primary songwriter. So it just I guess depends on the band situation. Another thing I always want to ask you about is when the Rods got together, did you guys always have the intent to be a three-piece? I mean, did you ever think about having a second guitar player?
I don't think so. I really don't. I don't think that was ever an issue. I think we all kind of came from. I know I love Blue Cheer, I love Cream, I love Hendrix. We love The Who. Those were kind of the bands when we were kids that we listened to.
Uh-huh.
So I don't think there was any question that David had been in Elf. He was really, after Doug Taylor left the band, and the band kind of formulated what was to be the band that recorded the first Elf album. It was always one guitar for David. So I don't know. For me, it was never a question of let's get another guitarist. David, if he plays an acoustic guitar, which he probably has never done more than twice in his life, but even when he picks up an acoustic guitar, it's definitely. So it was never a case of not being able to feel the sound. He was more than able to make that happen. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and now, I got to ask you again, because, the Rods, you guys are one of those bands, you've been around for years, and probably, people will say, oh, the Rods, yeah, I've heard that name, yet I can't name a single song. Why do you think you guys have had that kind of occur? Because again, you got a great fan base, a great cult following, whatever you want to call it, and you guys are still doing it all these years, later, but you're still, you're not a real household name, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I mean, really, I think the Encyclopedia of Metal classifies us as cult status.
Yeah.
So, kind of bubbling under, and you've heard of the band. The band's been around a long time. But, we've never had that breakout song or, the huge album. And, that's the way it is. Not every band, has that. And we had some managerial problems in the beginning that was very limiting for us. And, so whatever. I mean, it's like anything. There are a lot of bands who maybe have the same situation we had. I think for us, the fact that we like playing what we play, and I think we all like playing with each other, being in a group and doing what the Rods do, I think it's just kept us going.
Yeah, I mean, again,
I think the fans have been there, which was a surprise to us. That's probably one of the biggest thrills being here after 30 plus years is that, the fans are there still, which was a shock to us, and, I'm so grateful for that.
Again, that's not a dig or anything, because I got to say, like me, myself, I've listened to some of your stuff, and everything I've listened to that you guys have put out that I've heard, I can honestly say, but I think, oh yeah, that's great, that's great music, that's great metal, I really dig it, and the fact that you guys are still around doing this, when you haven't, had like the commercial success somebody like maybe Iron Maiden or Deep Purple had, I got to tip my hat that you guys are still around doing it, and that just goes to show, like you said, that you're doing it out of, the love of the music. This is what you really love to do, and when you put on a Rod CD, you can hear that in the music.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for saying that, and I appreciate that. I think there's no doubt that is the case for us. We do it because we love the music. I mean, like you said about my solo album, Headbanger, David has a new album out, summer. David's on his 4th solo album. And, it's just a case of we do it because we love it. Somebody asked me when my daughter was born in the recording studio, they said, and when she was little and she was wandering around, there are all instruments in the studio, and you push her to be a musician. And as it turns out, my daughter now has a degree in music education and plays a number of instruments well. And but she's actually a vocal major, but as well. But it was a case of, no, I don't want her to be a musician. I didn't push her to be a musician. If she discovers it, great. But because being a musician for me, you're an accountant, a lawyer, you can go home, and whenever in other jobs, you go home and you don't really have to think about your job.
Yeah.
As a musician, for me, it's 24 hours a day. If I hear the washing machine and it's got a rhythm, I'm figuring out the rhythm. If I hear a song on the radio and I hear a drummer who's playing like something a little differently than I would play it, I'm always in tune. I'm always listening to production. I'm always listening to rhythms. It's the windshield wipers. It's something that just you can't shut it off. It's all musical, and sometimes it makes you crazy. So I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But
yeah, and now
my daughter decided to be a musician as well, but it wasn't because I pushed her to it. Something she discovered. But I do think that's the way it is. You love it or you don't, and you're obsessed with it or you're not. That's
totally cool, and all the better you didn't force her into it. She just kind of doing it again, kind of like you're saying, out of a love of doing music. And now you brought up your new solo album called Headbanger. I'd like to talk a little bit about that now. What's it like from, even though you're very much involved with the songwriting and the rods, what's it like for you to to put out this product where you're involved with the singing and you're kind of a front guy, because I know you've done a couple solo things before, but is that something you really enjoy getting the opportunity to do because it's kind of something different outside of the rods?
I had songs that were not really a fit, just as David and I, we've written songs that really didn't fit. And when you mentioned about us being a three-piece, there's something that's very free about being a three-piece. It gives you a lot of freedom as a musician. You can play more than you normally would play if you have a more structured type of group. You can let loose a little more. By the same token, it's also confining because you're really stuck within that three-piece format. You don't have synths, you don't have strings, you don't have a keyboard coming in and playing different parts. You don't have a second guitarist playing harmony riffs and runs with you. You're limited to what you're doing. So we obviously, David and I write different music stuff that it really doesn't fit the rods, but you think the songs are good. So it gave me a chance to. I had the songs, and it gave me a chance to bring those songs together and kind of do them outside of what would be the confines of the rods.
Yeah, and like for rods, I gotta say I love the title of the album, Headbangers. It's kind of it's one word, it's simple, it kind of it describes overall feel of the album. But how did you come up with that title? Because again, it's something simple, but it kind of says what it is.
Well, I would love to take credit for it. Anything that anybody thinks is a good idea, I always love to take credit for it. But unfortunately, I can't on that. I actually was calling the album Madman, and that was my working title for the album. And Eric Philippe, who did the Rods album, and he's just a phenomenal graphic designer and really been a great friend. Eric, as we went along and he designed this album cover, he said, may I make a suggestion? And I said, sure. He goes, well, what about Headbanger for the album? I thought, that's a perfect title, it was just perfect. So I have to credit Eric Philippe in Belgium for coming up with that.
And so let me ask you, Carl, who do you have other music? Do you have a band that play, like a set group of musicians that played on that one with you, or do you have a whole bunch of guys that came in and played on different tracks?
This was done in a number of different ways. Mark Renilla came here a couple of times to my home studio and sang, and phenomenal, just phenomenal. I worked with him in TT Quick, the first EP they did, and the guy just works his ass off. He's such a great singer, and I was just blown away by, his work ethic and B, his talent. Dave Porter from 805, we actually went to a different studio in upstate New York, and he did his vocals there. Rosanna Galvo did her bass track in Brazil, and John Hahn, who really can't sing his praises enough. John Hahn is doing all the guitars on the album with the exception of 2 solos that he trades solos with Chris Caffrey from the Trans-Siberian Orchestra Sabotage.
Wow.
And John Hahn did everything. But John Hahn, I played on his solo album. We've known each other for years. And so it really was a case of I would send John my demo, and John would just work his magic, take my guitar parts, and take them to a place I couldn't even dream of. He's such a phenomenal player, and he would send them back. And that's how we did the guitar parts. So for me, a lot of times with the guitar parts, I would get a click track back, and I would get his guitar parts, and I would just open them and just kind of be in awe. And then at that point, I would lay my drum tracks down based on that. So it was really a number of things. Some people came here. Gary Chesick is my utility guy. Gary and I play in a local band, the Jeffrey James Band, and Gary was a great guitarist, but Gary came in and played bass on some tracks as I needed. It was really done with people. Chris Caffrey wasn't here. Chris Caffrey had tracks emailed to him and downloaded, and he uploaded them to me. And so that's really how it was. We just kind of went back and forth that way. So it was a different experience in that sometimes we were in the same room together, and sometimes we were really using the technology to work on parts.
And any chance that have you given any thought, like if you might be doing any touring or live shows to support the CD?
I know a couple of the guys have spoken about it, and it's tough to get gigs, and it's tough logistically because you have a lot of players, and so we'd have to take a core group of people whose schedules kind of stars align for us to do a one-off. But it is something that would be great to do, and I think if as we go along here and we'll see what happens if we can maybe pull a date or two together.
And how?
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, I guess is what I'm saying.
And how the fans?
It's unlikely, but it's a possibility.
And how the fans been reacting to the Headbanger CD?
I'm sorry?
How the fans been reacting to the CD? Have you been getting like good reviews? Has it been selling pretty good?
I wasn't sure. The fans and the reviews have been great, and far exceeded what my expectations were. I really didn't know, because when I produce bands, I'm either working with the Rods, where we're all involved, and we all produce the Rods albums. When I work with other artists, it's their vision, and I'm helping them realize it. So there's a lot of input and direction that already exists. In this album, it was kind of me, and I was the one who had the vision, and no one else really even saw the parts because of the way the album was done. So I had moments of doubt where I was thinking, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't even release this thing. I wasn't sure how it would be received, but it has been just really humbling that the fans have embraced it the way they have. I mean, really humbling that the response. So I'm thrilled. Can't say enough about that.
Yeah, and I think, you also got the thing going here where, like, it's not like, this is a new Rods album where, you kind of got that security blanket where people, when they buy a new Rods album, they kind of know what they're getting or what to expect. I mean, this is something kind of out of, out of that norm, so to speak. So when you were recording these songs, did you really feel, I think this is kind of what you're saying, was it very difficult for you to, because like when you're producing another band, you have an easy ear and you know if it's working or not. But being that these are songs you wrote and these are kind of your babies, was it very hard to be objective?
It was very, very hard to be objective, absolutely. And that's why toward the end of the project I was just full of self-doubt, And also I think there were challenges in doing this project. One of the things I haven't liked on solo albums is when you have a number of singers.
Yeah.
That the album takes on a whole different, like not every song is the same. You like one thing, and then all of a sudden, you have a whole other sound. And I really wanted to make it more cohesive, and I wanted it to make it sound like an album that was, a solid album. I wanted it to be more cohesive than some of the albums I've heard where they're using so many different guests. And I also had a lot of friends and musicians I wanted on this album, which was, became kind of a little bit daunting task to pull it all together and still make it cohesive. So yes, it was challenging in that regard, and it was, sometimes I thought, wow, you've really bitten off more than you can chew and on this one. But at the end of the day, I have to say that Brian New in Nashville did a great job mixing it and bringing all the different sounds together.
And now, for people that want to get the album, they could probably get it online or through your website. That's probably the best way to purchase it.
If you go to cdbaby.com, you can just type in my name and CD Baby, and Headbanger or Canedy will come up. You can go to therods.com, and there's a Canedy store there. So once you click on therods.com, you'll see a banner for the Canedy store.
Oh, okay.
And of course, iTunes, Amazon, it's there.
And now, like you're saying that people get this on iTunes and Amazon, but I'm guessing like on CD Baby and other sites as well, you can actually still, we're going to be physical copies of the actual CD.
Absolutely.
That's great because,
it's a 16-page, it's all full color, 16-page booklet. Eric Philippe did a great layout, So,
okay.
Really well done package.
Yeah, great. And now I wanted to ask you, because I'm looking on your Facebook page and I seen that you posted recently on there that anybody interested in taking lessons from you. So you actually still give people drum lessons. That's kind of a cool thing. What's that like?
It's funny you say that because I just shared a link for a friend of mine, Pat Marcinko, and he's a great drummer and he's a great teacher. But only recently have I entertained the idea of giving lessons. So, it's something I used to do, and I loved it, and it was rewarding for me, and it also keeps you on your toes. You're always having to learn things that maybe you wouldn't have taken the time to learn.
Yeah.
So, it's just a question of how many students you can take. But, I think it's something that I'm looking to do now. And
have you given any thought to, like, are you primarily interested in, like, teaching beginners or all different levels?
I think at some point, with beginners, it's more intermediate, beginner. I'm not opposed to beginners if they're serious, take somebody from the very beginning. Yeah. Sometimes it's rewarding to do that if they're serious because you're kind of helping them and guiding them along the way and showing them things they can do and kind of fast-track them, from your experience, which is rewarding, especially if they're dedicated. Somebody intermediate, already there, and they just kind of want to learn your approach. I think somebody who's already advanced, I think that data probably is nothing they need from me. Yeah. But I know that having studied with both Tony Williams and Carmine Appice, Carmine in the early days really took me through his books and syncopation and, sight reading. But one of the things that he taught me, which the things he actually taught me that have stayed with me, have been his approach to things, his concept. Tony Williams, when I studied with Tony Williams, it actually came to the point where Tony and I would just sit and talk, and some of the things that we discussed then are things that I actually apply to production to this day. And after, I stopped taking lessons from Tony and the past, he went on to put back and he studied composition and theory, and he became a great composer. So it was clear to me after that he was on that path. That was his path as a musician, was to be producer, composer, and so on. And so what we used to talk about really, like I said, I still apply that to productions. It's still something that when I'm doing something, I'll think, yeah, that's right. And it was about being true to the music and so on. But there were a lot of things that we discussed that I really appreciated having that insight into somebody who was so brilliant and such a dedicated musician.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up Carmine, because like yourself, he's a legendary drummer in his own right, and I almost think of him oftentimes as like a drum frontman, if you will, because one time when I was talking to him, he told me that he's actually the guy that started the kind of a drum off the Guitar Center has every year, and they kind of changed the name, but he's the guy that started that, and he now has his own thing going, I guess. But he was telling me, he says, my whole idea, no matter what project I am, I always got the concept of I don't want to be the drummer in the back of the stage. I want to be the drums front and center. I want everybody to be looking, at what I'm doing. And if you look at a lot of the stuff he's doing, even him and his brother Vinny, they got this Drum Wars thing. They just put out a CD, and it's more than just a drum clinic. It's an actual live band. They got a singer, a bass player. They play songs throughout their entire career. And I spoke with the singer, and he's telling me you got one guy on the left, one guy on right, playing the drums, and I'm trying to sing my ass off, and it's just it's original concept, totally amazing. I was wondering if you had a chance to check that out, Carl, the Drum Wars CD.
I haven't checked out the CD, but I have watched things on YouTube, and I loved it. I love the fact that you're right. Carmine was really the first drummer rock star. I mean, really the drummer, I think, who was really the rock star in terms of having the whole package visually was Dino Denali when I first started.
Yeah.
And Carmine actually talked about Dino Denali because I asked him about a couple things he was doing, and he told me that he had actually stolen the little piece. But I asked him about when he did a high school dance, heard Dino Denali playing it, wrote it down, and, stole it apart. So, but Carmine was definitely the real rock star drummer. He is a front man in his own right. He's not somebody who just sits in the back behind somebody and you don't notice the guy. He's out front, and he's still playing great. I mean, he's phenomenal to this day. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he's supposedly one of the guys that influenced, John Bonham. So that says it right there. And his Carmine's career is almost 40, 50 years, into it, and he's still doing it. All back go back to the days of Vanilla Fudge and Jeff Beck and Cactus, and he's still doing it.
He's still doing it, and he's heavy. He's a powerful, heavy drummer. He's a funky drummer.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of groove and feel the way he plays, and he's a really powerful drummer. So, I mean, he's just such a versatile guy. But he's a great teacher. He totally changed my drumming. I studied early on, and the teacher I had told me not to play match grip, that I played too hard. He was very negative about my playing, basically told me I sucked, and it was like a very negative thing. So, of course, after a while, I just thought, well, why am I giving this guy money to tell me I suck? I can figure out I suck on my own without paying the guy. And, but taking lessons from Carmine totally turned it around, and I tried to tell him that, what a difference it's made. I don't think he realizes, the impact that those lessons have made on my career and my drumming. But they're very, very beneficial for me.
Yeah, now let me ask you, Carl, getting back to you teaching people, giving these drum lessons, you, of course, had quite the career yourself as a musician. So when you're giving lessons, is it hard not to, play in your style or tell people, well, let me show you something, one of my songs, or do you typically have a student tell you, well, this is what I want to learn? What's your style as far as teaching?
I think it's trying to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
I did this four-stroke roll with my left hand, which you normally wouldn't play a four-stroke roll with your left hand. But, Carmine saw that, and he goes, as we were sorting out things I did well and things I did wrong, he said immediately, you know what, that's not really correct, per se, but it's cool.
Yeah.
So keep it.
Yeah, that's
so,
cool.
I try to go with, I don't try to insinuate my style, but I do talk about my approach basically the way, I learned from Carmine and from Tony Williams in particular about approaching it with your style, because today everything is drum doctor and triggered, and very hard for drummers to have their own sound and their own style, because when you get into the studio, you're re-triggering things, and you're, a lot of times you don't even know on some of the metal projects whether a real drummer actually sat behind the kit or not.
Yeah.
So, I think it's important to try to maintain an identity or to teach people to not to be afraid to try to find your own identity.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've always admired about you and the Rods, as a band. I was just going to ask you, is it ever get hard, because again, you put on any of your guys' album and that's the Rods, that's that band, that's what they do. Is it ever hard to, stay loyal to your sound and what you guys do as opposed to ever getting the urge to, well, it's 2015, I think we got to move on and put out a modern album and sound like everybody else? Does that ever get hard? Because so far you guys have done a pretty good job at staying true to the Rod sound, I must say.
Mm-hmm. I think it's, when we first reformed, it's been like 8 years now, that's something, time has been going by. But when we first, I stopped for a minute because, like I said, I'm always listening to young drummers and listening to approaches and styles, and, I practice that stuff, but I don't really always play it with the Rods, because it's not always the stuff I learn and play. It doesn't always lend itself to the Rod style. And, But there was a moment when I had to ask myself, I'm coming back after these years, the Rods are going back out doing days, and there's so many great drummers who just shred, and just phenomenal players. And I thought, in a lot of levels, I probably am not playing at that level with some of the things they're doing. So I had to really take a step back and take a look at the fact that, the only thing I can do is just play what I play as honestly as I can and bring my style to what I'm doing. And once I accepted that and embraced it, I found that young drummers have been very supportive of my playing. That they find something in my playing just as I find something in theirs, and they're very supportive, and they're like, man, that was really cool. And just as I say to them, wow, that was great, I love that. So the camaraderie is there, and the respect is there from other musicians.
Yeah, and so
I really had to take that step back and just ask myself, can I just go out here and just be myself? Is that going to be good enough? And once I just said, I just have to be true and see what happens.
Yeah, let me ask you. Yeah, let me ask you because the last album you guys put out. I mean, talk about your comeback album a couple years back. Shortly after Ronnie James Dio passed away, you guys put out this great CD. I can't think of the title right now, but it had Vengeance. It had a track or two that featured Ronnie, and to me, it was just a great comeback album because it just sounded so much like what you guys do, and it wasn't sounding pretentious or trying to sound like anything modern. It was just a great way to, hear some new music, and you guys got back out there. What was that tour like after all those years of, being apart?
Well, when we first started playing back, we just got together in Dave's rehearsal hall, and within 5 minutes, it was like we never stopped playing. So it all clicked, and it sounded the same, and everybody came back to it with the same intensity. And that was something I was concerned about. A lot of times bands age a bit, and they kind of become a parody or a caricature of what they were. They're not playing with that same intensity. They're not bringing the same edge, or they may have matured or mellowed. Or just now they're coming back to it from a different approach, and it seemed like I was concerned about that, but when we started playing, we all had that same attitude and edge, and so.
And I got to ask, in regards to that Vengeance album, when you were recording the track with Ronnie, I understand he was very sick, but so what was that like recording that and seeing this, kind of a family member, a guy, legendary guy that you've known all these years, getting him to appear on your album, but at the same time seeing how sick he was? Did that affect the recording or thing at all?
Ronnie came up. Ronnie actually came to David's studio, and at the time, Ronnie wasn't diagnosed. Ronnie wasn't sick.
Oh, okay.
So Ronnie came in, and Ronnie was, full on, and he was fine. So, it wasn't a case of when he sang he wasn't well. No.
Oh, okay.
Maybe in his body, there may have been, something going on at the time, but. It certainly wasn't something that was affecting him at the moment.
Oh, well, yeah. I'm glad to hear it.
He sang the songs about 2 days after the show at Radio City.
Wow.
It was the DVD. So,
well, I'm glad to hear that. But
DVD to see how great he was.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, but he wasn't really suffering at that time. But, those songs are like some of the last things he ever recorded. And you guys just got... What an amazing performance out of him.
Yeah, seeing Ronnie, it was just such a career highlight for me. The talent was just amazing. And David had always told me that Ronnie was a one-take guy, and to experience it was that. Ronnie just came, and if he sang something twice, it was basically to sing it differently, to try a different approach. But it was amazing to watch him. Just phenomenal. And so,
let me ask you. Were talking earlier about being a producer, Carl, and you mentioned that you'd worked with Anthrax. How long ago was that you worked with Anthrax? What album was that on that you worked with them on?
I actually worked with Anthrax on the first 3 records they did. I worked with them on Fistful of Metal, Armed and Dangerous, and Spreading the Disease.
Okay. And how did you come to work with them? Was it through their record label that somebody there?
It was through Johnny Z.
Oh, wow, wow, wow. And so when you first started working with Anthrax, what did you think of them? The first time you went in the studio or you heard what they, the material they had in hand?
I thought they were phenomenal. I mean, they blew me away. I actually had friends who said that, who heard some of the roughs and who hated them and just said there'll never be anything. And I said, this band's going to be at least a gold act, if not platinum. This band's going to be big. And my friends laughed at me. Some of my friends laughed at me and said, you're out of your mind. This stuff is horrible. But it was changing of the guard.
Yeah.
Anthrax was coming in, thrash was coming in. The style of music they were doing was basically new, and it was changing of the guard. And a lot of musicians didn't want to see that happening. But I was blown away by Anthrax from day one. I mean, I thought they were not just great musicians, but they had the focus, the drive, and the focus. They had everything it took to be a hugely successful band.
Yeah, I mean, even look at what they're doing today.
Pardon me?
I just say, even look what they're doing today, because I mean, I think one reason the band Anthrax is one of those bands that remains so successful even after all these years, even all the lineup changes, is because they're not your typical band. I mean, I know Scott and Charlie write a lot, and Frank write a lot of stuff, and they have a lot of times they have these singers that aren't as involved with the writing, which is kind of a unique thing, But I think that's why they've been able to survive all their lineup changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's right. And, I mean, it's just a fully dedicated band, and that's one of the things I saw about the band. But it's obvious that Anthrax just has that drive, and I think that when, like you said, there are a lot of musicians do the band until they settle on this last. And I love Joey in the band, I love Joey, but I mean, I think they've had the band is really all through their career.
Yeah. And now being a guy that worked with Anthrax early in their career, I got to ask you, Carl, when they did that single with Public Enemy, a rap and the metal crossover, were you at all surprised that they would do something like that?
I wasn't, and the reason I say that is because early on, Scott and Billy Milano and the guys, they would bring in Public Enemy, and they were so into rap before, I don't know that I was that aware of rap even existing. I knew from my lawyer that he had worked with some rap artists that were very, very early on rap artists that I just wasn't aware of them. But now I've heard, the guys' names, and obviously they were pioneers in the genre, but I really didn't. But Anthrax would come in and they would be spouting raps, and they would listen to the music, and they were totally into it from day one. Even though they were playing this heavy thrash music, they were still into rap. So when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's so left field. But it really wasn't left field for me because I'd seen the fact that they were so into the music to begin with. It was only it was a logical merger for them,
And now, put on your producer's hat, Carl. I got to ask you, when you go in to produce a band, as a producer, do you necessarily feel like that you have to like that band or be a fan of that band, or is it more of a fact that do I think I can go in the studio with this band and create a great album?
I think you have to really like the music. You have to feel that you can help contribute something to that album. And at first, I think when you first start, you kind of, as a producer, you find your way a little bit. But I think as time goes on, you learn that if an arrangement needs to be changed, a key change needs to happen. You need to send them away to maybe try, like the chorus needs to do something different. Why don't you try writing something along this line, but just go do that on your own. Or you jump in and you say, let's try this idea and work on a riff or work on an idea with the band. And it just depends on what you need. Sometimes you need to recognize that they're working hard on something when it's done.
Yeah.
You know what? That's it. That's freaking great right there. Let's put it down. So, I think if you don't love the music, and you don't love the band, and you don't respect what they're doing, it doesn't mean you couldn't do a good job. But I think that, for me, I have to really be involved in the music. Otherwise, anything I contribute isn't going to be very honest.
Yeah, and
it's going to be kind of doing it by the book,
Yeah, as far as producing as far as producing, I was curious. Have you ever gone in with any of the bands you produced and like contributed, like as far as the songwriting, and how hard is that to kind of have to write in the style that band is known for, as opposed to what you typically do for the rods and that?
I mean, I wrote on the Possessed album, Beyond the Gates. The whole intro piece was mine. I wrote that.
Okay.
But if on the other bands I've worked with, I'll suggest a riff or an idea or a change. It's not necessarily rewriting their songs as much as contributing to arrangement parts and adding something here or there. So no, I actually don't try to write. I mean, I know some producers. I know that Mutt Lang, it seems, will just go in and rewrite material and take the writing credit, which is brilliant, because I think the guy is a brilliant producer and a brilliant songwriter. But I try not to do that. I don't take publishing. I don't try to write with the band and try to claim any songwriting credits as a rule. I mean, I worked a little bit with Red Forrester and Jack Starr on actually Red Forrester and Paul Kane, I should say, on Red Forrester's album, the writing material. And so I have some writing credits on those songs.
Oh, wow.
Overall, I work on parts and ideas, and I contribute them, and even though they can technically be considered part of the songwriting, I don't take any credit for that.
And then I was curious, what was the point in your career when you decided, I want to give a shot at trying to produce other bands?
It was really, I was interested in recording. I always had ideas for arrangements, and that was always kind of something that I really, had ideas for. So when we started the Rods album, this band Colossus, which has just been released, the album was called Gone Are the Days, and it's Colossus Unforced now, and that's been the compilation of all the material that we wrote and recorded. But when that band started to record, that was the first album I ever recorded.
Wow.
And I had 3 songs on that album, and it was basically came down to, you have no money, you're struggling to get money for studio time, and each of us produced our own tracks. It was as simple as that. But I loved it. I had the ideas and what I wanted to try. And then when we started the Rods, David and I would sometimes be the only ones in the studio, and that was it. We just started working that way, producing our own stuff. And so producing other bands just kind of came out of that.
Wow. And so right now you got this Headbangers CD that, the solo CD that you have out. And I was curious, are you guys getting back to work with the Rods? What's going on with the band? Any chance we'll get a new CD from you guys any day soon?
Well, we are actually working on material. The one thing that's been a little tough is that we probably have some material in the can already, but we have our songs chosen, and we're starting to work on some new material, but it has been really brutal since I live about an hour and 15 or 20 minutes from the band, the other 2 guys. It's just been a wicked winter to try to get enough time to actually get stuff in, but we do have it mapped out, and we are starting to work on new material, so it's only a matter of time before I think the fans are going to see new Rods product. And
any chance you guys will be doing any of the summer festivals?
We're going to play in Belgium in May 23rd, and we are going to Chicago on May 2nd and play that. And then we're going to probably do a couple of club dates in upstate New York. And there's D.O. Day is coming up in June. So, we have dates right now. We have... that's really all that I can announce.
Okay, cool. And now you guys, I know you do typically you play a lot throughout Europe. Any chance you'll be playing, throughout the rest of the United States, or that'll probably come after the new CD's released?
Yeah, I think we'll see what happens. We're doing the Chicago date, the Ragnarok thing, and it's just things get offered to us, and it's just a question of what makes the most sense at the time. So.
Okay, then and then the last thing I want to ask you about regarding the Rods is, I see on your Facebook page that you guys are going to be, it just says spring 2015, you guys are going to release two of your old releases, Heavier Than Thou and Hollywood, I guess, which have never officially been released on CD. Could you talk at all about that?
That was great. That was a great thing that they had never been released, and now they're going to be releasing. And there's actually talk that they may be on vinyl, so I'm excited about that. But yes, it's the first time they've been out. I mean, and those two albums are two albums that both Hollywood album has Rick Cottle, who's a phenomenal singer, and actually Duck McDonald was the found Rick Cottle. Andrew Duck McDonald from Blue Cheer and Shakin' Street.
Oh, okay.
He and I did the Thrasher album together, and Duck found Rick Cottle. And also when we were in the studio with Anthrax, and their singer just wasn't cutting it, and they said, okay, we're done. Now we have to find a singer in the middle of spreading the disease. I called Duck, and Duck was suggested Joey Belladonna, so we brought him in. So Duck has had the ear for singers.
Wow. That's
Rick Cottle sang on the Hollywood album, and then through Jack Starr, I met Shmulik Abedal, who came and stayed with me. And Shmulik, when David heard Shmulik sing, he just didn't even want to bother singing on the Heavier Than Thou album. So Shmulik sings on that, and I think it's a great album. I think it's a really underrated Rods album. I think Shmulik sang his ass off on those songs, and it's a killer album. It's really one of the better Rods albums. And it was just never released. It came at a time when the label that we were on, Passport, folded, right when the album was released, and right in the middle of the promotion, the label folded. So it really didn't get the promotion it deserved, and so I'm glad it's out. I'm glad it's out. Both singers are great, and I'm thrilled.
And so, as far as the other Rods releases that you guys have released over the years, are all the other albums currently still in print?
Wait, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
Well, I was asking, talking about these two albums that you're going to release on the CD for the first time. As far as your other albums, the rest of the Rods catalog, are those albums still in print?
Actually, I'm trying to think what would be in print still. I think the first two CDs are going to be released. They're going to be released through iTunes, which they've never been.
Oh, okay.
That's going to happen shortly. And as far as the other albums, just a question of time. I mean, we've been in talks about doing a whole box set.
Oh, that would be cool.
Question of, it would be great to have a box set. It'd be great to put everything under one umbrella.
Yeah, because that's
for me to have a real fan box set. So we'll see. I mean, those things are less feasible financially these days, but we've been discussing it with different people. So
that's
what happens with that.
That would be definitely a cool thing, because that's one thing with a band like the Rods, where some of the stuff is out of print. You got people coming to your shows who may not have heard some of the earlier stuff, so that would be a great thing to put out. Now, to put together a box set like that, would it be very difficult to get the rights to all the music? I mean, are you working with different labels and all that?
Yes, and that's what we're just trying to find the right situation to promote and do that album, do that box set. So.
Yeah, well, I gotta say, Carl, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to do this. I'm gonna get your album Headbanger, because I want to check it out for myself. But please keep my number, and this interview will be going up in early March, like I said. And anytime you want to do this again or have anything to promote at all, please get in touch with me. I'd love to talk to you again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason. I really appreciate the time, and I really appreciate the support.
Oh, you got it, my friend. It
means a lot.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I put you right up there with the guy like we were talking about earlier, Carmine Appice. I mean, you haven't quite been doing it as long as him, but you're quite the legendary drummer in your own right. So I urge everybody to go out and check out any of the Rod stuff and get this new Headbanger CD. Carl's a legendary drummer, and he does not disappoint. So thanks so much, my friend, for taking time to do this.
Thank you, Jason.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.